Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. My name is Adam Bradshaw. This is the Strath here in Victoria and our Whiskey Club Whiskey Folk, and we are really, really excited to present to you today our two single casks from Signatory. And yeah, this is very exciting. So a special thank you to Michael, the importer, who went to great lengths to get us these sample bottles, because the actual bottles or shipment still hasn't arrived. These were supposed to have launched last week, but we couldn't because of the strike here in BC. Everything's kind of been held up by that. So there will be another Signatory tasting soon, and these bottles will launch soon. But all that means is that if you've not managed to get a pre-order in yet, you still have a chance, and now I get to show you my thoughts and share with you my thoughts and feelings about these whiskies, and give you an extra reason to save 15% on pre-ordering these whiskies. Sound good? All right, so Signatory, we've been working with them this year. If you haven't seen my other videos on Signatory, they kind of explains a little bit more about their background, but they're an independent bottler based in Pitlochry. The whole Signatory Vintage idea from the beginning was to get famous or semi-famous people to sign each edition. That was the Signatory. So you'd get, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a famous person, Billy Connolly, to come and sign an edition, and then all of the whiskies would have. That was way too much effort, and they realised at the end of the day they just had a lot of really good whiskey on their hands, but the name stuck. So this is still Signatory Vintage, and they do incredibly good whiskey and incredibly good prices. So much so that after just one tasting event, which was very well received, and we had some incredible scores come out of it as well, we just bit the bullet straight away and just bought 2 whole bloody casks from them, which is a pretty mad thing to do for a small independent liquor store in BC, but we've got that much faith in the product, and I love the opportunity that we've had to be able to bring these 2 whiskies to market particularly. There's a story as to why I chose these 2, which we'll get into. It's very, very exciting. So yeah, these whiskies, Michael actually went to the UK and brought them back in his luggage for me, and then sent them over on a float plane, which I picked up this morning from the Inner Harbour. So they've done a lot of travelling. So I'm really grateful for those. So if you're looking at these being like, what do you mean the whiskies haven't arrived? They're right there. The actual imported into the country so that we can sell them whiskies have not arrived. These are just sample bottles. And if you're wondering why they held back sample bottles, so there's 315 bottles of this whiskey in existence. 315. I didn't quite finish my math degree. I flunked out in the last year. Ran off to New Zealand, one of the two. I did enough of my degree to know that 315 doesn't divide by 6. And when you're importing whiskey, you have to do it by the case. So there's a little bit left over sometimes. So thankfully, that little bit of leftover got rescued by the agent when they were in Scotland. And they sent us a little bit of an some advanced bottles, which means that I get to share my thoughts and opinions on these whiskies with you before they launch so that you can save 15%. Beautiful, isn't it? All right. So what did I choose? Which 2 distilleries did I choose? Well, it was based on feedback from the initial whiskies that we had. And in fact, one of them, this is the one we're going to start with, is actually a sister cask to one of the initial Signatory releases, which is pretty cool. This is the first ever, actually, funnily enough, single grain Scotch that we've bought a cask of here at the Strath, here at Whiskey Folk. And that's kind of monumental in its own, monumentous in its own way. I'm really excited by this because single grain is a category of whiskey which I feel is like horrendously underrepresented here, and we've been spreading the good word now for about 10 years here at the Strath as to the glory of single grain and how it's different, but not worse than single malt. It's just a different style, and people have started to listen, and people have started to really enjoy single grains like myself, and we've got a following of single grain lovers here in Victoria now, which is absolutely wonderful. So a little bit about what makes single grain different. So In Scotland, there's two categories of whiskey that can, or spirit that can come off the still in Scotland. You've got single malt, which specifically has to be 100% malted barley and in a pot still, a traditional kind of still, like the one that looks like a giant copper bulb of garlic upside down, with the thing coming off. Yeah. You know the one. If it's not that, but it's still a whiskey, it's a grain whiskey. So that means if it's made in a different type of still, say a column still, or if it's made with different types of grains, say wheat or corn or anything else, then it's technically a grain whiskey, not a malt whiskey. Single just means it's from one distillery, right? So single malt means it's malt whiskey from one distillery. Single grain means it's grain whiskey from one distillery. Blended malt, more than one distillery. Blended grain, more than one distillery. Blended, malt and grain together. The 5 types of recognised whiskey by the Scotch Whisky Association. I always thought, though, technically there's a 6th, because there are some distilleries that make malt and grain, and surely that would technically then be a single blended Scotch. Loch Lomond, for example. I don't think that's officially recognised by the SWA, but it makes sense in my head that exists. So the history of grain whiskey is really interesting. It started off, I've got dates written down here because I'm terrible at remembering numbers. 1828, Robert Stein started that. With his initial design for a column still. And while it showed promise, it wasn't great. It wasn't as good as it could be. It didn't really get perfected for a whole 3 years later. In 1931, Aeneas Coffey, an Irishman, invented his patent still, his idea of a column still, called it the Coffey still, because it's his name. And that caught on like wildfire. It was absolutely everywhere across Scotland. It got suddenly picked up by a lot of distilleries as this new type of still that could revolutionize the way that whiskey is made. It wasn't officially sort of recognized as whiskey until 1860 with the Excise Act, but it was a bit of a wild mess of legislation in Scotland for whiskey back then anyway. People didn't really care about official designations and legislation. They just made the stuff and drank the stuff and enjoyed the stuff, and that's kind of the end of it. In fact, I think it wasn't until the early 1900s that they officially made blended whiskey like, yep, this is definitely allowed to be called whiskey, which is kind of wild because it had been made at that point for like 70 years. Yeah, it's kind of wild. So North British makes grain whiskey. Only grain whiskey. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they've ever made a single malt, but we'll find out more because I'm actually, hopefully, I'm setting up an interview with some of the folks at North British, so I'm looking forward to being able to quiz them on some of that kind of thing. If you've got any questions for North British, drop them in the comments, and I'll be sure to include them in that video as well. But yeah, they make grain whiskey. Sometimes corn, sometimes wheat. I believe that sort of changes with availability and style. They were using wheat, but then they were getting their wheat from Ukraine, and well, that kind of, so they're currently using Polish corn, I've found out, which is kind of cool. But you always have to use a little bit of malted barley because of the enzymes that you need in malted barley to kickstart fermentation. You're not allowed to use artificial enzymes in Scottish whiskey. You have to have some malted barley in there as well as other grains, which is a very important thing. So North British started in 1885. It was a collaboration between Andrew Usher, William Sanderson, and John Krabbe, who got together because at the time, all of the big grain whiskey distilleries were owned by giant companies, and there was no independent whiskies for blending houses to sort of get a good deal from. So they created North British as this kind of sort of teamwork effort, a way to have collaboration. I think that's an important part of North British history, and also something that's been retained to the present day, because it's actually co-owned by 2 companies now today. It's half owned by Edrington, the guys that do Famous Grouse, and of course it's in Famous Grouse, who do Macallan and Highland Park. And it's also co-owned by Diageo. So it's kind of wild. It's 2 competing companies co-owning a distillery. But it somehow works, right? I think it's Diageo. I'm questioning myself now. It's one of the other big companies. In the back of my head, I was like, no, it's Beam Suntory. But I'm only thinking that because they've got the same importers, and I'm fairly sure it's Diageo. So sorry if I'm wrong on that. I should have double check that, but I'm fairly sure it's Diageo that co-owns it with Edrington. And of course they have Johnny Walker, J&B, I think is Diageo, Bell's is Diageo. They've got quite a few blends that they do. So yeah, I mean, grain whiskey is primarily made for blended whiskey, which even today, with a huge amount of press and prestige that single malts have, grain whiskey is important because blended Scotch is where the vast majority of the market is. Around the world, it's something like 80 to 85% of Scotch that's sold is blended, not single malt. So grain whiskey is an incredibly important part of that. In fact, I was reading an interview recently with the former master blender of Famous Grouse who said you can't make a blend without first starting with a brilliant single grain. And that is what North British is all about, starting with that pure palette that you can't paint a beautiful painting without a nice canvas, right? If you've got a crappy canvas, you'll end up with a crappy painting. And to a certain extent, the same thing can be said about the grain whiskey. Now, people think because grain whiskey is like cutting a blend, you're adding more flavorful malt whiskies to grain whiskey to create that blended whiskey. It means that the grain is the lesser part. No, it serves a different purpose. Think of it like whiskies are instruments in an orchestra. Yeah, you want those like beautiful violin solos of the single malts. You want that big, deep brass section, maybe. But you also need the ensemble. You need that sort of bass to make everything else play off of. And that's a very important part of it. You can't have the first chair violin without the rest of the chairs, So, yeah, I mean, if I haven't persuaded you yet to give single grain a try, I possibly never will. It's weird how many people have this pompous opinion that single grain is beneath them. Grow up. Fucking try a single grain, for God's sake. All right. I'm going to try a single grain right now. So what's the stats on this? North British Distillery. It is 2009 vintage, aged for technically 15 years. And I say technically because it was distilled on the 23rd of June 2009 and bottled on the 17th of June 2025. So 6 days away from its 16th birthday. It's a first fill ex-bourbon barrel, cask number 260316, and we got 237 bottles out of it at 58.6% alcohol, and we are the only place on the planet where you can get this whiskey. I trimmed my thumbnail this morning, and that was a bad idea because it makes it much harder to open whiskies. All right. The all-important pop. Quiet, but effective. So I'm going to let that sit and open up for a second. It is a fresh pot, so, it's been trapped in the bottle for a little while. I'll let that breathe while I tell you about my own personal connection with North British and why I love the distillery so much. It's nostalgic to me. Not only do I love the flavour, I've had some incredible North British, and we've shared some incredible North British as a club. I've actually wrote some scores down recently. So the sister cask right here, actually, this guy actually got a 4.3 out of 5 in our club, which is really high for a 14-year-old 46% grain whiskey. That's actually the same score. We had a 30-year-old from Boutique Whiskey Company of North British, which had like a creepy Dr. Evil guy on the front label for some reason. That got 4.3 as well. And a sneak preview we had of our upcoming signatory event. We're releasing there a 1991 Signatory Vintage cask as well, a sherry cask. And that was an entrant in our tournament, came second in our whiskey tournament. And that got 4.5, which is one of the highest scores. So that's, single grain does well, especially when tasted blind. It's different, it's interesting, it stands out in a tasting because it is a different style of whiskey. So why is it important to me and nostalgic to me? Because when I went to Edinburgh, I went to Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. I lived in a little flat on the top floor of a little apartment building on Angle Park Terrace, right next to a pub called Diggers. And from my bedroom window, I could see North British Distillery. I would wake up and smell North British Distillery in the morning. In the summertime, if I had the window open, it's basically I would smell the breweries and the distillery, and I would wake up and know I'm home. It was just, yeah, I miss the smell of Old Reekie, Scotland in Edinburgh. There's nothing else quite like it. And it was a huge part of the community. You'd see the trucks go past. A lot of I actually met several workers of North British at the pub when I would go for a drink at Diggers. Or actually, I knew several people that worked at North British at the pub I worked at as well, at the Royal Oak in the city centre. It was an integral part of the community in the Gorgie Dalry area in Edinburgh. So yeah, I mean, the distillery itself has huge meaning to me personally, and it's a great honor to be able to share a distillery that I love so much with my friends and whiskey family here in Victoria now. Yeah, that smells quintessentially North British. What do I mean by quintessentially North British? One of the reasons I love it so much, even in comparison to other grain distilleries, I would say it's the boldest, the thickest, the sort of the syrupiest almost of all of the single grains. Don't get me wrong, I love many other grain distilleries. I love Cameron Brig, I love Girvan. I have a special place in my heart for Dumbarton, a closed distillery as well. Strathclyde, so many beautiful, beautiful distilleries. Cambus, that make grain whiskey. But this one to me is kind of has a special place because it is a little bit more bolder. It's got a little bit more body to it. The quintessential note that I always get on North British is Werther's Originals. Another nostalgic thing, because Werther's Originals is what my granddad would give me if he took me for a ride in his car. We'd always have a Werther's. So it somewhat reminds me of a Fiat. But yeah, it's got that beautiful caramel nose. It may not be as deep and complex as a single malt, but that's not necessarily what I'm always looking for in a whiskey. Sometimes I want something that's a little bit more easy to understand, an easier conversation, something I don't have to go digging for to find out information, someone that's a little bit more upfront, you know? Oh yeah, it's everything I wanted it to be as a sister cask to this. And I'm actually going to pour myself a little of this as a comparison. So this was bottled at 14. So I'm just going to call this a 16-year-old. It's technically 15. It's basically 16. A couple of years older, and also cask strength. So this one's only 46. Oh yeah, the nose similar, but very, very muted in comparison in the non-cask strength version, as you'd expect. The cask strength version, nice and big and bold and up front. It's got that caramel. It's got that. It's also got a little bit of a sort of apricot custard. For sort of not that I've ever had an apricot custard, but I'm sure you can imagine apricots and custard mixed together. It's got very much that kind of aroma. Oh, it's bloody lovely, that is. It's really warming. Like, you can feel the alcohol, not in a burning sense, but in a glowing sense. The embers, like, it warms you up. It's 58.6, so alcoholic. But it really helps carry the flavor forward. It feels like I'm eating a warm, sticky toffee pudding, you know? Oh, and now I've had a sip, the nose has opened up even more. Sticky toffee pudding is absolutely the go-to flavor profile I'm getting now. Oh. Sticky toffee pudding with an apricot custard. Exactly what I want in a grain whiskey. Yep. There's definitely some similarities. This one's 5 casks blended together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 casks blended together. All sister casks to our cask. I will admit this one's a little softer, a little rounder. This one has a little bit more edge, a little more personality, a lot bolder due to the ABV. Yeah, that is a final product, exactly where I wanted it to be. And I'm not mad that it's a week out of being 16, because it just means that we got it for the price of a 15-year-old, and it's as good as a 16-year-old. So, bargain. How much of a bargain? A bloody good bargain. The full price of this when it launches on the shelf is going to be $135.57, which for a basically 16-year-old single cask whiskey from Scotland is already an outstanding value, but 15% off for the pre-order means you can get this for $115.23. Yeah, put your order in now at strathliquor.com. Just go to the Whiskey Folk page, you'll find it there in the featured whiskies. Hi, yeah. Happy days. Yeah, that turned out beautifully. All right. So, sigh of relief for that, because you never quite know how a whiskey's going to, the final product's going to end up. But always a relief when I get to try it, and I'm like, good. Actually, I'm going to try it with a little bit of water, see what happens, see if it. I like the warming though. I don't think I want it to be less alcoholic, because I really enjoy that warm sticky toffee pudding experience. Yeah. It works fine with water, but I definitely think I prefer it without, personally. Yeah. All right. I finished the glass, so I must enjoy it. Next up, our second of the two casks, Craigellachie. This is the one that I definitely brought in more for the whiskey folk at large, and not just a me wanting to, that we have, don't get me wrong, we have single grain fans. This is going to be one where I have to persuade people to try it, because a lot of people are still single malt snobs. This is one that people are clamoring for. People love this style of whiskey, and one of the hardest things about a big, bold, meaty worm-tub whiskey like Craigellachie is making sure that the cask maturation matches the boldness of the whiskey itself. Sherry cask Craigellachie's we've had a fantastic run of them in the last little while from independent bottlers. We had an 18-year-old called, what was it called? Something about oranges. Forage into Orange. It was a 44 SNWS. Bloody beautiful. One of the best black label SNWS whiskies I've had in a long time. Of course, came with a price tag. And we had some absolutely fantastic ones. We had a Douglas Lang, which again, really pricey for what it was. It was a beautiful teenage sherry bomb. It was the midnight edition. It was like a 14-year-old Craigellachie first fill sherry cask, and it was like $300. And it's a beautiful whiskey, but it's a hard sell at those kind of price points. And then we tried a couple of big sherry bombs in the first Signatory tasting, and they went down really well. That Boonahaven. I think it got like a 4.7 or a 4.8. It was just incredible. And I knew then that the guys at Signatory can be trusted with big sherried whiskies. They're not going to go over the top. They know how to balance whiskey and spirit, and they've got good quality wood. So I was like, when I saw a Craigellachie as one of the available options for casks that we could buy, I jumped on that so hard, especially again with the price, the value that we got this at. Just unseen levels of value. So let's see how this one turned out. So I'm going to pour it first, let it open up a little bit while I go through the stats and tell you a little bit more about Craigellachie. Alrighty. I'm hoping for a slightly more voluminous pop sound on this one. Let's see. Yeah, we go. The Craigellachie's not shy. Lovely. Let that breathe, Adam. Let it sit for a second. All right, so I'll tell you about Craigellachie and then I'll go through the label. Craigellachie founded in 1891, so it's actually a younger distillery than North British, funnily enough. Not by much, 6 years, but still technically younger. It was a major component of the White Horse blend for the longest part of its life. I think it was actually built specifically to provide whiskey for White Horse. rebuilt completely in 1965, but still do things a very traditional way. They use worm tubs to limit the amount of copper contact, which helps it create this big sulfuric new make, which then gives this big meaty flavor profile. And people hear the word sulfur and go, oh, nope, don't want sulfur in my whiskey. But you do in the new make, because when you strip away that sulfur through aging, it leaves behind other flavors that you can't get any other way, which is an important part of the Craigellachie maturation story. They still use wooden washbacks as well, Douglas fir and Oregon pine washbacks. They're now owned by Dewar's, by Bacardi. In 1998, Bacardi bought them out, and now they're used in the Dewar's blends, and they've actually been launched as a single malt as well. You can get an official bottling from them. In fact, their lineup of official bottlings, as a math person, I really enjoy the fact that they chose prime numbers. They've got a 13, a 17, and a 23-year-old as their official bottlings, which is, it stands out on the shelf. It really does. So kudos to them on that. And yeah, their official bottlings are perfectly fine, but their independently bottled whiskies are what really draws me to the distillery. Again, I have a personal connection, in a sense, to Craigellachie. This is a very tenuous link, but much like I would wake up every morning and see North British, I see something that reminds me of Craigellachie every day, and I have done for almost 10 years now. Because in the foyer of our hotel at Strathcona, there is a very famous photo of Lord Strathcona, who our business is named after, driving the last rail spike into the Trans-Canada Railway in the town of Craigellachie, BC. I think it's pronounced Craigellachie, but I have been told that locals call it Craigellachie, but I think I might be having my leg pulled on that one. In fact, when I first moved here, someone told me that the Comox Valley, the X was silent, so for like 3 years I called it the Como Valley, and no one corrected me for a long time, which was very embarrassing. So maybe it's Craigellachie, but I'm betting possibly not. But Craigellachie, BC, where interesting link to our business name as well. Like I said, very tenuous link. All right, let's talk about this bottle. So cask strength, of course, is 62.3, 16 years, officially 16 years on this one. It was distilled on the 6th of April 2009, and again bottled on the 17th of June. Bottled on the same day, these two. It's funny that, order at the same time. Yeah, the labels are at the same time, bottled next to each other on the line. This is a first fill sherry hogshead. It was cask number 900248, and we got 315 bottles out of it at that 62.3 ABV. 2009 as well, so both 2009 whiskies. Oh, it's so bold. It's so bold. The nose is straight up like, oop, blimey. The nose is straight up Mortlock 16 for me. Like a cask strength version of Mortlock 16. That's bloody lovely. Yeah, I'm getting sort of dried figs and molasses on the nose. Coffee. Such a different whiskey to the North British. Hilariously different. Getting this nice sort of winter herbal note. And I don't know how to describe that. Like it smells like a Christmas wreath, like a holly bush. All right, I'm going in. Interesting. Very interesting. That's a funny, non-linear, big bold right at the front of the part there, like lots of flavor as the get-go. And then it sort of like goes up a little bit again, and then sort of goes down and then fades. It's not a linear fade. Like the finish is long but non-linear. Like inverse exponential almost is. Yeah, and there it slides and then lingers. Slides and lingers. Beautiful. And then a bit of reverberation. That is a beautiful experience. yeah, exactly what you'd expect. Those, big sherry sort of flavors, lots of dried fruit, a little bit of ginger in there as well, which is always a nice thing. But then it has that special trick that Craigellachie does in its teenage years, and the thing that made the orange S&WS one so pleasant. Craigellachie, when you age it for 15, 16, 17 years, it changes quite dramatically. The 13 and the 17 official bottlings, quite different. That meatiness subsides a little bit and gets taken over by some tropical fruit notes. And the big thing that I often get in Craigellachie is this almost like fermented pineapple note, which I absolutely adore. It's like a bougie pina colada, but not really. There's no coconut. It's just a pineapple. I don't know why I said pina colada. It's like a bougie pineapple-based cocktail. I don't know enough about cocktails to know if there is a fermented pineapple cocktail. But imagine if you're familiar with lambic beers from Belgium, imagine a pineapple lambic. That's the kind of flavor profile I get. It's absolutely stunning in these older Craigellachie. And there is more rounded fruits as well. There is sort of a little bit of that orange in there, cranberry, alongside those dates, figs, dried fruits, and bigger sort of umami, meatier flavors as well. It's like, it doesn't have the zing, but it has the like a little bit of that balsamic vinegar effect without any of the sort of acid that you'd get with the vinegar. Imagine a de-acidified, not alkaline, but a pH neutral balsamic vinegar, if you will. Lovely. That is bloody lovely. That turned out real well. All right, for science, I'm going to add a little bit of water. I really don't want to because it's stunning without it. Let's see what happens. Changes colour quite dramatically, isn't it? Oh yeah, so I think that brought it down to around 40. It's pleasant. I think it shines better at cask strength. I should have probably got a pipette and played with the ABVs a little bit more delicately, and I look forward to doing that a little bit more in my own time, but it gets to be a long, boring video if I'm like adding 2 drops and be like, oh yes, it's a little more heathery, add 2 more drops. Oh, it's a little more bacony. You don't want to see that. But yeah, dumping a decent amount of water in there and making it more in that 40 ABV. It's still a good whiskey. It's kind of got some coffee notes that I wasn't really seeing as much before. Little dark chocolate, but yeah, definitely prefer it cask. All right, and pre-orders of this one are, of course, also open, and again, 15% off. At full price, at less than half of what the incredible Craigellachie I mentioned before were. Less than half the price of some of the whiskies, which it's just as good as. $166 even before discount. So at 15% off, you can get this for $141.10. Yep, less than $10 a year for a cask strength, single cask, exclusive Craigellachie in first fill sherry. Oh yeah. So, now it comes to one of the other reasons why I did these 2 whiskies together. One of my favourite things to do with whiskey is be playful with it, to experiment with it. And one of my favourite things to do is blend. And I wanted to have the official, unofficial Whiskey Folk blend. And I thought these 2 would work really well for that. So I'm going to test that out right now. I'm going to test it out geekily at home with a proper kit so I can test the actual ratios. But I'm just going to do a little rough, vague 50-50 and see how that comes across. Just for fun. It might be awful. And then I'm going to tell you a little secret. All right, slancher. Oh yeah, that smells lovely. It's It's so custardy on the nose. It's taken all of the custard from that North British and just applied it to the Craigellachie. That's incredible. It's like some kind of like butterscotch pudding on top of a Christmas cake. Oh, that's fun. I like that. Very much recommend trying this at home. I'm going to have so much fun playing with ratios of these two. Oh. Damn it, I should have just bottled them together. That is phenomenal. Although I am very, very much biased on that because I just made it. But if you go home and you make your own ratio and you really enjoy it, you can be biased too. In fact, once these are released, and if you do try this, I would love you to come back to this video and comment on what ratio you've found works best for you. I think that's a real fun thing to do. However, the fun doesn't end there, because this is actually only 2 parts of a trilogy. Yeah, we've actually bought 3 casks from Signatory, but one of them isn't launching until the Victoria Whisky Festival. And whilst these are polar opposites, there's a third dimension that you can add to whiskey flavour, and that's smoke. So we have a peated single cask from Signatory coming out in just a couple of months, and we can't wait to share that one with you. We're not going to be doing pre-orders on it because it's going to be a shadow drop at the festival itself. So watch out. If you're at the festival, you will get a discount on the day that it launches. That 15% discount will be applicable to people at the festival and for a very brief amount of time online as well. So keep your eye out for another special Signatory release. But I am happy, I am relieved that these whiskies are as good as they are, and I cannot wait, even more so, I cannot wait for that Signatory tasting to share this with a whole room of people, and I cannot wait to launch it officially the day after the tasting. Very, very soon, as soon as we have notification that it's going to arrive, that will officially go on the calendars. So yeah, put your pre-orders in. Once it's arrived, we will let you know when you can pick it up or when it's being posted out to you. Canada Post is accepting packages again now as of this week from us, so that's good news. Yeah, thanks for sharing this digital whiskey with me. I look forward to sharing a physical one with you hopefully in the future. Sláinte, stay well.
Your